Welcome to Titans of Transition. Having challenges finding that right job for you? Tune in as we talk to Sarah Baker Andrus, a job search strategist who has been on all sides of the job search equation, both filling positions, recruiting, and also advising candidates to nail that perfect job. Listen in as Sarah blows up some of your assumptions on what it takes to land that job. Sarah is a job search strategist, and I love her tagline. She says, I help people make bold career moves. If you would, take a few minutes and talk about your own personal transition from your educational background, your industry background, how you became a career strategist.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I think like most of us, I fell into my career path by accident. I was in graduate school. I had the good fortune to have a job on campus where they had me providing some advising for adult students who were returning back to school, either due to layoffs or coming out of the military. I was so inspired by their willingness and capacity to make change at different stages of their life. And I think that stuck with me. I had this curiosity about the business world, and I thought, well, I'm not sure academia is for me, and I'd like to try something else while I can. So I thought, why not? Let's give it a shot. I started Avara Careers. We do career coaching as well as consulting on staffing. And as you said in the opening, we try to help people make bold career moves in the time we're living in right now of the Great Resignation and the impact of the pandemic. People are really looking to make sure they have a good career fit.
You use the word bold career moves. So I'm just kind of curious why the word bold.
It's very strategic on my part because the fact is that there's a cycle that most of us go through when we are thinking about a job change. Something triggers us, something annoys us, something doesn't feel right, or we see an opportunity and we think, I want to go for that. And there's a lot of energy and boldness in that. So we immediately might take action, but usually we're not taking the best action. And what happens is then the fears set in, and we stall. And this becomes a cycle where we stall until something else triggers us. Oh, it's time to make a move. Let's try again. So the boldness that I think I help people with is to avoid the stall, to avoid the fear, or to, if not avoid it, at least work through it, understand it's coming, and develop some tactics for dealing with it so that you can achieve that bold move that your best self really knows you're capable of.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's this fear component. On one hand, they're being pulled forward by something. Maybe there's friction. Maybe there's something that's really nudging them to get out of their comfort zone, the status quo. And you know that we all can get stalled into that status quo, the safety zone. It's biological, all that stuff. But there is a chasm. We want to get over there, but that fear just keeps us stuck. People are asking to be transported to the other side without having to take that risk, without having to be bold. And that's why I think I connected with that bold word.
Yes, I think I call that magical thinking.
Magical thinking. I like that.
We have the dream, we have the thought. We kind of don't recognize that action on our part is required. No fairy godmother is going to pop out of the sky and grant you your wish of the dream job. It really does take some intentional targeting and consideration and reflection on what you have to offer and what's going to be a good fit for you.
Are there specific examples you could share with us of clients that you have taken through this kind of transition?
Yeah, absolutely. The client who comes immediately to mind is a very accomplished senior executive for a tech company whose name you would recognize. So when he came to me, he said, I'm not ready to retire. All this expertise that I've gained over the course of my career, how can I have an impact on the world I don't need to contribute to any company's bottom line anymore. I want to really think about what's important to me and where the skills that I have and my experience are going to have the greatest impact. And so we worked together. And interestingly, I encouraged him to simultaneously continue to apply to jobs at organizations he was looking at while he was also exploring this business idea that he had. And the reason why you want to do both is to actually compare, how do I feel when I'm in this interview? How do I respond to the type of opportunity that they're presenting me? And he was very fortunate to be a incredibly accomplished, really well-educated, very well-connected guy. So he was getting interviews for big positions. And I would talk to him after each interview and say, what's the temperature? How did you feel about that? And with each one, he said, not as good as I feel about trying this idea that I had. And what he found was that even though going out on his own was going to be a bigger risk, it had a greater reward. And he's doing really well. And his business is thriving. Yeah.
That's awesome. How long of a period of time were you engaged with him?
In this case, it was about 3 months.
Yeah, that's...
So not that long.
Yeah.
Once you make a decision to really do this, it can go pretty quickly and you set the pace. I think the other important piece here is, who are you talking to? Because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There are people who've gone before us and made all kinds of transitions, whether it's starting a business or going to a different industry or navigating the networking challenges. And again, that's a learned skill. You can talk to people and find out what they did. Doing the research and looking at the opportunities actually gives us a foundation for a bold move.
You know, for me, and I think we chatted about this a little bit offline, about how a career can be a zigzaggy kind of path. I was in a technology leadership role for decades. It didn't really light me up, to be honest. I found out that it wasn't so much the technology that got me excited. It was leading change, but it was really the aspect of leading change around people, and really more about the change in people. So coaching is what really got me to make a move away from that safe career. Once you get used to a profitable career choice, it's hard to walk away from that, even though that might not be your best spot.
I'd like to speak to the word you raised of safe.
Yeah.
Because there is no more safety. And the safety is an illusion we create for ourselves. But in many ways, and certainly with my own transition to owning a business, it was a very conscious decision not to put my career in anybody else's hands again.
Yeah.
We as human beings, we tend to overestimate risk, and we tend to underestimate our capacity to handle difficulty. So if you know that going in and you look at things as they are, not as we wish they would be, you realize that perceived safety of the corporate role is just that. It's perceived. And certainly in the last 18 months to 2 years, that's become abundantly clear.
Yeah. But it's always been that way, but it's become more clear to everyone. I've talked to a number of people who have had change thrust upon them. And to a certain degree, a lot of these changes were external because of the pandemic and companies needing to reshift. But a number of them weren't. They were completely caught off guard and found that all of a sudden they were out. And I love the clarification of perception. And that was what I was really trying to drive at. That was my perception at the time. I grew up in a time when my parents were in positions where they would have a position with an employer that would last their entire lifetime.
Right.
And that's very rare now.
Not only is it rare, but it's actually undesirable. So we know that now there is a bias against people who have stayed with the same organization for whatever the recruiter thinks is too long, whatever that is. We also know that today's graduates are going to probably have 4 different jobs before their 30th birthday. If we know that and we prepare ourselves for that, and we begin to think about our careers differently, then it actually can be an adventure. And you can look at your career more as, what skill set do I want to develop next? Or who do I want to work with next? Or what type of work and what kind of industry am I curious about? And it's really hard to give up that stability that we all naturally want. And at the same time, by looking at it as it is, rather than as we might wish it would be, we're really becoming far more resilient and agile in a job market that's going to change whether we want it to or not.
Yeah, I love the framing. I usually phrase it this way: the world as it is versus the world as I'd like it to be. This whole idea of passivity also translates into how you approach your career, just from a generic standpoint. Are you going to just wait for things to come to you? Why haven't I been promoted? Why aren't things moving faster? Rather than owning it and having a vision, the direction you want to go in, where you want to work, what do you want to do? Is it serving you? Do you need to make a shift? All those things are active and proactive versus the passivity of sitting back. And that can happen over a long arc. In my case, good things were happening frequently enough, not that bad things didn't happen, but frequently enough that I said, I'm just going to hang with this. But I wasn't being proactive about really digging into what really was best for me, what really connected strongly with my gifts. I was more opportunistic.
I was the same way. And I think
moves.
that came out of the environment in which we grew up in, where that was just what was expected. Be grateful. You have a good job, you're getting promotions or what have you. I didn't realize for a long time that I had as much control as I did over my career. And then it took me a few more years to decide to exercise that control.
Yeah, totally. Let's talk about lessons learned in a broad sense, both from your career, but also from the perspective of dealing with your clients. Do you see certain trends in interacting with your clients that come up often that you tend to address in this similar way with your client?
Absolutely. There's a few things that come to mind, Joe. The first is that we need to have fluency in the language of us, in how we want to talk about ourselves and what we bring to the table. And we need to practice that. So that is one theme, no matter who I'm working with, even if they are a very confident, accomplished person, they have probably not practiced speaking about themselves and their high point achievements in a way that make their skills obvious. In fact, often I'll find that the more accomplished the person, the less practiced they are, and the more assumptions they make that their job title or where they went to school or certain achievements should say everything that needs to be said about them. Well, that's not true. Not by a long shot. The best way to present ourselves, especially if we're looking for a new role, is to have some high point stories that illustrate our skills. Because hiring managers don't want to have to do the work. They want you to do the work for them. They want you to be able to tell them why you're the solution to their problem. And to be able to do that very clearly demonstrates that you understand the role and what it's going to take. And that really makes the difference between a candidate who gets the offer and the one who doesn't at any level. It's that understanding, what is this role all about, which means doing your research, which means talking to people in the company, which means knowing what the organization's challenges are, what that department's challenges are, asking them, hey, I'm curious, what do you like best about the organization and what do you wish you knew before you started working there? We can ask for all kinds of insight when it is the informational interview. And now you have to establish yourself as the best fit for the job. And the thing I like about those kinds of questions, and also the technique of pivoting in your answer, and I'll get back to that in a minute. The thing I like about these questions is they stimulate conversation. The candidate who's going to get the job is the candidate who builds rapport and has an easy communication with the person they're talking to.
Yeah.
If you've gotten the interview, you already meet the basic qualifications for the job. And now your job is to show you understand what it's going to take. And you're already thinking about it and seeing yourself in the role. Frequently, I'll suggest to clients that in the interview, they ask a question like, what will success look like in the first 3 to 6 months? And another great question is, what's keeping you up at night? Mm-hmm. A pivot might be if I asked you a question, tell me about a time when you had to face some barriers to taking an action that you knew was the right thing to do. That might be a typical high-level question that you would get for a senior role. You know, can you stand up to the naysayers? And not only do you want a story for that, which is really important to talk about when you've done that before, but you also want to be able to pivot from that and say, I'm really curious. Tell me about who the naysayers are here, not by name, of course, but what might be the common reasons why we might get pushback on, or why you might get pushback on what your objectives are. And in the interview process, really being your authentic self and making it a two-way conversation so you can find out if that's the job you want, if that's the person you want to be reporting to, and if that's the team you'd like to be a part of. And this is what I advise my clients all the time. Don't wait until you're desperate to find a job. You should be working on your career resilience at least once a year, reaching out to contacts, looking at other organizations, asking yourself, is this situation I'm in healthy right now? Do I have continued opportunities to grow? And in that process, reaching out to people and saying, who else is doing exciting work out there that I might want to be a part of? It's all research. And if you approach it as research in these networking conversations, I could say to you, Joe, hey, you work for that company for a number of years. What do you think somebody coming into the company should know? Or I see you worked with that particular hiring manager. What was your experience with that person, or what's that person's reputation? Now, you always have to take that with a grain of salt,
Sure.
But it's good information to start with. And there's also reviews and feedback you can find on the internet. Now, nobody goes on the internet or a board like glassdoor.com to, say great stuff. Right. Rarely. But repeated negative things that have the same theme, we can save ourselves a lot of trouble by not even looking at those organizations.
Yeah, that's great. Great summary. Let me ask you this canned question. You probably are expecting this coming. So if you were to give yourself advice as your 25-year-old self from your own personal point of view, obviously you love what you do and you're in the right spot and you're doing great at it. But thinking back to when you started out, what would you say to yourself? Now, this could obviously be different than what you just summarized for us.
So if I think about what I would say to my 25-year-old self, I would say, be bold.
I love
and
it.
I think, just to come back to where we started, I was too timid. I didn't have enough confidence in my own abilities, despite the fact that I routinely got exemplary performance reviews. I would say that I could make a move, even if it felt uncomfortable or a stretch. And the more practice I got with that stretch, I think the more rewarding my roles might have been over the years. Because another skill is the stretch. And I wish I had done a little bit more of that. Of course, that's 2020.
Sure.
But I will also say this, that whatever decision you make, you can make it the right decision. And I think that I did the very best that I could with the information that I had at the time. And I give myself a lot of credit for that too.
Boy, Sarah, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I wish I had talked to you when I was 25 years old to get some of these pieces of advice and at key parts and transitions throughout my career. It's been great insight. Okay, guys, make sure you check out Sarah's site and do reach out to her if you want to avail yourself of her services. And I would also say she does have some TEDx talks up there, so you might want to check that out as well.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Joe. It's been a pleasure and a fun conversation. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for joining me today on Titans of Transition. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please check the show notes for additional information. Also, please like and subscribe to this channel.